mind if I do a quick mic test?
Oh, go ahead.
Mic 1, testing 1, 2, 3. Mic 2, testing 1, 2, 3. Mic 3, testing 1, 2, 3. Mic 4, testing 1, 2, 3. Mic 5, testing 1, 2, 3.
Do you know where they hide the where's the Wi-Fi on the new computers?
Settings.
Not under settings. Taskbars, sound, installed devices, Bluetooth devices, personalized
Right,
computer.
so you
6,
have to go to
testing
the
1,
little
2,
4
3.
squares on the left-hand side of your bar at the bottom. Click that and under, oh, I pinned my settings. Are your
Mic
settings?
7, testing 1, 2, 3.
Shit.
Mic 7.
I don't have 4 squares.
Mic 8, testing 1, 2, 3.
Oh, up on top.
Mic 9, testing 1, 2, 3. Mic 9.
Oh, there it is.
Those little 4 squares.
Oh.
Where you pin down. So you're in settings. You
This is
should
the
be
table
able
mic,
to- now that
testing
you're
1,
in
2, 3.
settings, right
Table
click
mic.
there, over that little gear icon, right click over it.
Standing mic, testing 1, 2, 3.
And
Standing
then,
mic.
oh, no, so it's, so see those 4 squares there? If you click that.
Well, I got into
Yep.
settings and it does have networking.
Okay,
So I'm
yep.
hoping that it's gonna open something up.
Testing 1, 2, 3, testing 1, 2, 3, remote, test 1, 2, 3, testing 1, 2, 3.
Squares, it opens up, you should have all those options to click on. Up top to get you to the settings faster. Interesting. And when you did this
Just-
little arrow,
Yeah,
you
it
didn't
have any-
see, there's your Wi-Fi right there.
Yeah, but it didn't give me anything.
When you double clicked on it, it didn't open up anything? Huh, no connection available. That's, I would have been booted.
Takes me to here, but none of these are.
And Sean
I have not seen.
and Rowan. Any of you met Rowan yet?
No, I've been trying to get together for a boots thing.
Oh, yeah.
There's Gabe.
Okay.
Yes, like Ariana and I would do that thing.
Sean did the first season.
Like, Purdy had that tradition of like meeting with new members, and then Ariana kept it going.
Yeah, she's.
You're trying.
I wasn't. No, I didn't have any thought to do, and she was like, "Yeah, I'd like to meet," and I was like, "Why?" I'm like, "Oh, that's cool." I'm not gonna. I don't know anything. What do you?
Well, I can meet with you guys if you figure out. Grumble, grumble. Cheers.
Maybe. Oh.
There's Sean.
And Rowan signing on.
Okay.
Okay. Can I ask a quick question of the group before we start the meeting? Are we gonna have a meeting in 2 weeks? What are people's availability in 2 weeks? It's the,
22nd.
yeah,
Yeah,
You-
I will be here.
you are available?
Yeah.
Thumbs up. Okay,
I think I'm available.
perfect. Just wanted to check because I figured.
I'll be available, but
Having the,
remote.
email exchange, we'll just figure it out. Okay, looks like we're all here. So I'll call to order the December 8th meeting of the Montpelier Planning Commission. I don't think we need to review the Zoom procedures unless you want to, Mike.
No, I think we're good.
It's
We'll
always
do
on the agenda,
mine.
so I figured I'd
Yeah,
ask.
well, if we've got a number of people from the public, then we have to kind of have a conversation.
Yep. Next on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any additions or changes they want to make to the agenda?
We should also probably introduce the planning commissioners who are online.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Ron Linehan, Planning Commissioner.
Rowan Hawthorne, Planning Commissioner.
Welcome, Rowan.
Welcome. So does anybody have any changes they'd like to make to the agenda? Any additions? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Next is the consideration of the November 10th minutes. Please take a minute to just take a look at those. Let me know if there's any corrections or changes that you'd like to make.
Looks quite accurate to me. I would motion to approve.
Got a motion to approve. Is there a second? Coy. Gabe seconds. Everybody taking a look at the minutes? Okay.
I'll second. Anybody else is? Did we still need a second? I'll second.
We don't need it, but we'll take it. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye. Any
Aye.
nays? All right, the minutes are approved. Next is comments from the chair. I don't really have anything tonight other than to say Rowan is here for the first time. Welcome, Rowan. I don't know what else
Thank
to
you.
say.
Apologies.
Yeah, you've come at a very good time. We're starting to take a deep dive into the zoning regulations in advance of making some what promises to be probably some fairly substantial changes based on a lot of discussion that the commission's had over the years, and also sort of in the wake of us passing the city plan. So right now we're just in a place where we're basically doing a thorough review to get all the commissioners kind of more familiar with the details of the zoning regulations. So welcome, and just look forward to a lot of discussions in the future. So
That's perfect. Thanks.
that next is general business. I see we have Steve here tonight. Steve, do you have something you'd like to?
Well, yeah,
Ben?
I don't know what's in number 6, so I don't know what what I'm gonna talk about is already on the agenda or not, because 6 probably needed to be broken out. Steve Whitaker, Montpelier. I have warned you, a number of times about our lack of planning on Country Club Road and how we're headed for a train wreck. And the city plan is still under appeal. It's approval by the regional commission, but our planning director has been representing to developers and others that phase 2 has been completed of the brownfield cleanup, and that's simply not true. He also represented to the developers that showed up for the site visit that the traffic's been studied and it's okay. It's been determined that you're okay up to 140 housing units. That's fundamentally not true. There has been no traffic study, and there was a traffic assessment, a minor piece done by VHB, but it made no such claims that you can get away with, nor that VTrans is going to allow the city to raise Route 2 by 3 feet in order to more closely match the railroad grade. So we are caught in a flurry of deception and lies by a city official, and our brownfield violations are just stacking up. You're not allowed in a brownfield, which went into effect on July 7th of 2022 or July 8th. We were accepted into the brownfield program. We were not supposed to accept title to the land until phase 2 was completed. Instead, we accepted title to the land on the very day that we were admitted into the umbrella program. Therefore, our immunity is at risk. The liability immunity for a brownfield. Similarly, someone in the city has allowed Feast Farm to go up there and dig holes and till gardens. Then they thought to test it, and sure enough, they found contaminated soil in the Feast Farm contained section. They aren't supposed to till. You're not allowed to do any soil disturbance on a brownfield unless you have written permission from the Commissioner of Environmental Conservation and a soil management plan, which spells out the hazard protections that need to be, do people need to wear hazmat suits or masks or whatever, But now the city has announced it's got plans to trench from the daycare building over to Feast Farm in a hurry before the freeze, which they missed, to put in a water line. And you can't trench without written permission across brownfield I forget the right. I've been learning too much about brownfields, but I can't memorize all the jargon. In any case, this is the classic mismanagement that is putting kids at risk. The area where we've dug fences illegally in violation of the I rule, it's called, and we've put fenced pens for the kids to play in around the building. none of that area has been tested. And then Mike's telling folks as recently as last week, oh, the contamination is limited to a few greens and fairways. That's simply not true. We don't know how far it is. We know that Stone Environmental said it's significant enough, it's already gotten the groundwater and it's probably moving. So that's part of more testing that needs to be done. But without having tested, you can't designate these areas as clean. So we found contamination almost everywhere we sampled. And so a gridded testing regime plus groundwater monitoring still has yet to be done. And it's probably going to cost $100,000 or $200,000 to complete that. And Mike said, oh no, we're just going to like ignore it, like let the developer have it for a buck and they can build 140 homes and we're all. And then he's lying about the low and moderate income. That if we got the Northern Borders grant for $3 million today, or it was voted last week, but that's only $3 million of a $7 or $10 million project. But you can't start it because you can't dig in a brownfield without assessment being complete and written permission from the commissioner. So, but it also triggers NEPA. And NEPA says, National Environmental Protection Act says you can't make decisions. I forget what the jargon is again. You can't make decisions that bind future use. And what did Montpelier do? It signed a lease and packed in a whole bunch of kids, 60, 80 kids, on a brownfield without permission in violation of NEPA. And where is the Planning Commission on this? Where's the Planning Commission on the capital budget, which was being voted last week and possibly this week too? The capital budget and program are supposed to be prepared by the Planning Commission under statute. And that's how you implement the priorities that you set for where road, sidewalk, water, sewer needs to be prioritized and where the money's going to come from. Planning Commission, not a peep, not a budget, not a program, not a peep. The city has resorted to a staff committee with a couple of city councilors on it, but they're not the ones authorized by statute to do it. Y'all are supposed to do it. So I'm just saying that the brownfield's going to catch up to us. We cannot allow a multi-million-dollar piece of real estate to go for $1 when the potential bidders are being deceived by none other than our planning director. That's a false representation. That triggers federal. I mean, this thing is such a mess, and y'all have the ability to ask the right questions and to raise the alarms and to prioritize and insist on a master plan. We won't know until the full site assessment is completed and then the corrective action plan is completed. We won't know what areas are available for building. And yet Mike and VHB created a big pretty map and said, oh, you can build anywhere here. That's not true. It's simply not true. So some areas might have to be trucked out. We don't know how many thousands of yards of soil will need to be trucked out of there, or how much of it will need to be capped and never built on. We don't know any of that. And you can't go around representing that the property's open for business, ready to start building, and let's dig and let's contaminate the kids. This is freaking outrageous that y'all are, it's classic Mike, and y'all are like sitting here, let him do whatever he wants. Can't see it from my house. So anyway, I'm here to sound the alarm bell. If the court may be the only way to get it done, but it shouldn't take the court. If we've got people who consider themselves, our public officials, responsible for planning, y'all should dig into this. You really should, especially an attorney. I'll provide all the documents. I'll even send you the pleadings. Thanks.
Thanks, Steve.
Oh, one more thing. The minutes, when somebody says that the minutes don't reflect, they don't think the minutes reflect the neighbor's points, that should raise a red flag too. Unless you've already researched it, which I'm sure.
Why are you laughing? I believe she was talking about the minutes from the development review board.
Okay. All right. Okay, well,
Referencing there.
I stand corrected. It wasn't clear which minute should,
Okay.
but it should, maybe the development review board will take it up.
Can I ask one? Is it
Sure.
okay if I ask
Yeah.
a question? So today is about brownfields, and a year ago you were chatting with us about prime ag soils, and I'm curious how you balance this. A year ago, when we were talking about developing up at Country Club Road, you brought issues about, well, this is prime ag soil, and there is an organic farm that is approved up there as a positive thing. And now the issue of the day is brownfields. How do you balance those
I
two in your head?
learned about the brownfield since then.
I'm asking you, how do you balance those two things in your head? So you have
You
prime
do
ag soils,
testing, and then you determine what,
but a year ago you were yelling at us for not considering prime ag soils and the organic farm that was up there that you touted as a really positive thing for the city. And how could you take that away in place of and replace it with development?
I think you're mischaracterizing
I'm not.
what I said. But
Considerations worth pondering. Prime ag soils protection as a priority for farming and community gardens. That's an email from you
it's still
from
true.
December of last year.
It's still true if it's not contaminated beyond repair.
Okay. But at the time, you were telling us you must consider prime ag soils.
Yes, that's still true.
And now today it's
I don't know if they're
brownfields.
not, if they're contaminated.
Okay.
What part of that logic do you not
I'm-
leap to?
I'm just saying it feels like there is a new emergency every
Then
other.
do it, and it won't be so mysterious.
I'm doing all the work that I can.
You're trying to trap me in some logic.
I'm not trying to trap you. I'm listening to you for now over a year. And it feels to me like a very big push against housing development in this city.
No, I'm all for housing development.
Excellent.
Village, a walkable village up there, provided it's proven that it can be done safe and kids can play on top of the ground. Maybe there may be areas where no digging is allowed.
And that is your opinion about how housing should happen up there. And I think that we should hear your opinion and everyone else's opinions as well.
And you don't do jack shit about any of it.
Excuse me?
I just said it.
Thank you, Steve.
No thanks to you.
I said thank you, Steve.
If I could just get a quick response for the record on really targeting specifically on the brownfield piece. So there is a phase 2 done. There's a phase 2 report that's done. The fact that there is a requirement for a supplemental does not negate the fact that the phase 2 is done. It's simply how the process works. You do a phase 1, you have phase 2.
Phase 2.
Hold on.
He should know.
I do know this. It is a phase 2, and everybody who does brownfields, and just so people understand, I've worked with brownfields in the past, whether this was in Berry City, the Berry City Place was a project I worked on. That was a brownfield, as well as Enterprise Alley, which was on the opposite side of the road in the parking lot. That was a very, very significant brownfield that was contaminated with perc, which is a dry cleaner fluid. And so, I've worked extensively with brownfields and doing cleanup work, so I'm very familiar with it. Steve is just trying to understand the basics of how things work now, and it's just clear he doesn't understand the basics of brownfields. So there are no brownfield violations. The BRELA was supposed to happen. You cannot purchase or should not purchase the property without the BRELA. That is why the BRELA was at the time of purchase. We had the application in, and that is when it is supposed to be done. The trenching, Steve likes to kind of ignore things that are given to him. He had a public records request, and we sent to him the information in the public records request, which included the site plan, which showed where the tests had been done, and it included the entire span of the golf course. All of them color coded, so that way you could tell which ones were above and which ones were below the threshold requirements. And of overwhelming majority, all of the fairways were all clear. They were all yellow. Only the greens had areas that were red, and not all of the greens were but all of them were marked because there was the potential of contamination in those areas. So Steve has that map. And so for him to say that there hasn't been testing simply means he's not looking at the public records request that he's looked at, that he's been provided. There is a map that shows where all the testing has been done and where the samples have come up. There was a map that showed the site plan of where the trenching is going to go. He also received an email in that same set that came from DEC authorizing. So we asked permission to put that trench in. They came back, they authorized, they said, yes, you can put that in, provided Stone Environmental marks the path and ensures that none of the brown contaminated areas are affected. That is in an email he received and is choosing to simply ignore it. And we have permission. Stone went out and marked the path, and we're going to put it in. Why? Because we have permission to do that. And it has been marked and is going to avoid the areas of contamination. On the capital budget piece, we hear this a lot. A little bit is for Rowan's benefit, so she gets a little bit up to speed on some of these pieces. Capital budgets can be, we usually talk about capital budgets and programs, capital C, capital B, capital budget and program. It's like 4430 of Title 24. It's a very specific provision that allows the Planning Commission to do this. And if you want to do certain things, if we wanted to have impact fees, we have to have that. If there are certain programs, we have to do it in this way by having the Planning Commission develop a capital to do the capital budget in order to do those pieces. We don't have impact fees. We don't have those requirements. We can do it that way. The city has chosen not to. In certain cases, we may have to, if there's a certain grant requirement, then we may have to go through. But at this time, we don't have a requirement for the Planning Commission. We always can go through. If the Planning Commission in the future is interested, we could certainly have maybe a Planning Commissioner volunteer to be a part of the Capital Budget Committee. So that way you're aware of what's going on there. It is a good opportunity. A lot of what we talked about in the city plan, remember we talked about implementing, how do we implement our goals? And we use projects as one of them. Well, projects is something that would be in a capital budget. And this would give an opportunity for the Planning Commission to see how we're lining up our projects and our programs with our actual spending of money. So it is an opportunity, but it is not a requirement under state law. So I just wanted to at least put that on the record. I don't want to debate everything here, but I think it's important just so, you know, a lot of times we get a lot of comments that go unresponded to and people start believing them. And so I'll leave that at that.
Can I ask a question? And maybe we want to make a decision or something. I mean, I've been on the Planning Commission 4 years. I feel like Country Club Road, well, preamble to the question, right? I feel like Country Club Road was plenty of listening sessions, all kinds of things that were done before I ever joined the Planning Commission. It seems, you know, Steve has some things that, I mean, some of what he brings up, I mean, there's really some interesting points. You know, we need to research, we need to understand. I don't know anything about brownfields. I mean, Mike has some good answers, but it seems to me that sometime long ago, the city council, who we advise, right? The city council who are elected, took this project under its jurisdiction, and they're actively moving forward. And, you know, they put out the request for qualifications, which is moving to request for proposal, potentially, whatever the next steps are. It seems like we should, I don't know if we want to decide or just state generally. I mean, it seems like questions and concerns about Country Club Road should go to the city council and not to the Planning Commission. Like, we're trying to work on the future policy, and that's a current event. That's just, you know, that's just my, because we could talk about this every week, but it's like, well, we're trying to make things better for the next, Maria's point, like the next 30, 40 years, right? That's something that was decided, you know, before I ever joined the Planning Commission. So.
And Aaron, Mr. Sheriff, very 2 points. The SA reports 1 and 2, the phase 2 report says more testing is needed. It did not say these areas are clear. It's like, we don't know where else it is. So that's one misrepresentation you just heard. The second is that there's no contamination where the pipe, the ditching is gonna go, or that the Frisbee golf things weren't violations. A email from a low-level staffer at DEC is not the same as written permission from the commissioner. They are two different things, two different echelons. Written permission from the commissioner is not granted easily. And you can't just say, oh yeah, just have Stone watch out for you and consider that permission. So we are not in compliance with, we are allowing Frisbee golf to dig and upset. We've got the Parks Department up there with a backhoe scraping hundreds of yards of soil around that has not been tested for or deemed clean, right next to a stream. So we're making a huge mess up there, and yes, you're right, the planning commission, but this city doesn't have an environmental officer. It's not our sustainability coordinator or our light bulb changer or our planning director. We don't have anybody paying attention. So it's high time somebody does. And if y'all are planning where development can and should go, this should be on your skill set. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I mean, no, go right ahead.
I was gonna say, to Gabe's point about, I mean, it seems like the planning commission, if you like think about the forest and the trees, it's like we deal with the forest. But we have the discretion every now and then to dive into the trees, but it seems like the DRB and city council are the ones that make these decisions about individual projects. I think it is up, but I think it is a good discussion of whether we do want to get involved in more specific things or whether we're happy, you know, being at that like high level, we're just going to edit the zoning regulations and then like give it to others to kind of enforce and meet out. But it's a worthy discussion, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think there's one, we're just not in a position to sort of evaluate the veracity of what you're saying versus what Mike's saying right now. And I appreciate, you know, the message that you're trying to send to us that we should be broadening our sort of understanding around the Country Club Road parcel so that
Because you won't have another chance.
right, and just for a sec.
If
I
you get this
believe-
wrong,
Steve, just let me finish what I was gonna say. Is I think to Gabe's point though, I agree with you. It feels like, I mean, sort of as a very loose term, like the train has left the station with respect to whether or not, you know, Country Club Road is, we're gonna try to develop it. And that is, you know, the city council has taken the laboring oar there. That being said, is I would not be surprised if one day down in the future, something will come in front of us with respect to that parcel as those plans move forward. And so I think it does behoove us to gain some familiarity with these concerns that you're raising. That being said, Steve, I mean, again, we can't sort of just dive into all of these, we can't dive into the weeds head first and try to wade through this stuff, because again, we don't have a context in which to sort of evaluate these concerns. Like, we are not being confronted with some request from a developer or from the town to opine on something. At the point that we do, then yeah, this is helpful sort of background to think about. But again, I can't.
Before it should have been in the plan before the plan was approved. You've left a big gaping hole or black box in your city plan. Publicly owned, 138 acres.
Okay, so Steve, again, what are you asking us?
You can reopen the city plan and start working on a plan for Country Club Road.
Well, I mean,
And then make clear to the council that they shouldn't commit falsely to developers what they can't promise because it's a brownfield or because there's mercury moving in the groundwater.
I mean, there's no portion of the city, well, I can't engage in this discussion.
All right.
I'm trying to acknowledge that like you are bringing issues to us that like we should familiarize ourselves and be able to ask questions about if and when we are confronted with a request from a developer regarding the parcel moving forward. It sounds like to me that Mike has answers for some of those questions, and you're saying that you don't agree with those answers. We'll be able to hash that out if and when we cross that bridge, we are not there. I mean,
If I bring credible evidence that Mike's lying to you, you damn well better look at it, you know?
okay. All right.
With that,
So with that.
6 o'clock.
Okay. So, does anybody else want to talk about what any of this? Well, specifically what Gabe was talking about?
I'll just tack on to what I heard from Gabe and from Maria. It's a space that I think I completely agree with, and we all have our roles to play within the city. The Planning Commission does feel like a sort of upper level view and approach to zoning districts and the city plan, which is also an upper level document, and then it goes forth from there. The Development Review Board, Design Review Board, the city council are working specifically on these projects. To my understanding, it's not really our space to be deliberating about specific projects. And I also think it's valuable that we're not doing that. There's plenty of people doing that. We're focused on a different space, again, that nobody else is working on. And I think it's really valuable that we stay within that space.
And I guess I just want to be clear, I'm not suggesting my response to Steve that we need to get into the nuances of like what his concerns with brownfields are.
Sure.
I think what I'm trying to suggest is that there may come a time, and it may not come either, but in the past, we have been approached by developers that seek, some sort of zoning change on a parcel to, help enable development there. And this is just to say that given the scrutiny and the issues that are on that parcel, it behooves us to just be able to make sure that all of our ducks are in a row so that we can make those decisions and, know that we're doing it in a timely and appropriate fashion. But,
yeah.
So
and I think that having general familiarity is really important.
Yeah. But I think what's more importantly from this discussion, I mean, it is helpful to hear from Mike in response to these comments that, the city is taking the appropriate steps to ensure that, things are moving in a logical, sequential, and appropriate manner. So that's just helpful for me to hear that.
Yeah.
When faced with these types of concerns, which we can debate about, how valid they are, but they are concerns nonetheless.
Yep.
So, but and I'll just say, Gabe, like I also agree. It's just I don't have much appetite to revisit the Country Club Road parcel every other meeting. It doesn't really interest me. Well, I mean, just in terms of like what we do, we're not really in the loop, nor should we be. So, with that being said, moving to the next item on the agenda, which is an update on planning projects in the city.
So yeah, I mean, Steve mentioned it. The big announcement today that came across the wire was that we did receive our Northern Borders grant. So the Northern Borders grant application that the planning department put in was for infrastructure to Country Club Road. So we need about $11 million to put in to replace the pump station that's at the roundabout. So if you go to the roundabout, there's one little parcel over there by the river that's always vacant and fenced off, and that there's a pump station in there for the sewer plant that does an elevation shift, and that needs to be replaced. It was damaged in the flood, so that has to be replaced. And then the lines from that pump station out to Country Club Road and up Country Club Road, including adjusting the grade of Country Club Road, bringing it down to about a 12% grade, so it's not quite so steep. Bringing up the elevation of Route 2. These are all Class 1 highways for the city, so Steve again doesn't quite understand the process of how these things work. We will be working with AOT VTrans when we go to get these plans, but it's not an issue for us to elevate it. And it just to help that intersection, there's a railroad track that goes across Country Club Road, so you kind of have to dive off that. So it would help to balance that out. And And then it would also set up the intersection for a light. So we kind of anticipate after you get 100 past 144 vehicles, that's what the preliminary assessment says. We won't know until you don't do traffic studies until you have a project. You need to have a project because the traffic study is so dependent on the uses. Senior housing is different than just not senior housing, regular housing. Apartments will have a different ratio than single family homes. So you really have to find out what the mix is before you can do the study. But in general, back of the envelope, we're talking about 144 housing units we can put up there. And at that point, it means we have to have a traffic light, which we've already have a budget for. We already know we've got the money. We'll be putting a traffic light in there. We know that's going to be okay. There's no constraint issues on that road or any of the neighboring intersections where so we already know that. We've already looked at that. That's why we have traffic engineers that take a look at it in advance, because we need to identify what barriers could come up. If we know about things in advance, we can prepare for them. So that's the background work. He says we haven't done it. We have done it. But that project, this money, so we need 11 million to do all that infrastructure, put sidewalks in up that road. And it goes up to the site, so up just past the building, because the city-owned road goes up past the building. So this infrastructure would go up past the building and would bring basically the services to the site, where the developer will take over and build the next piece. But we need about $11 million. This is $3 million. We anticipate getting the rest of the funding from the disaster recovery, CDBG-DR. That application will be due in January. Well, the pre-app will be due in January. The application will be due at the end of February. We'll hear about it sometime in April, I think. So that is our expected way of getting the funding to bring in and build all these utilities that will be needed to make the site happen. The developers themselves, working with TIF and CHIP, will build out the infrastructure on the site. And so, but we don't know what that's going to be. And there is an RFP process. Well, we're in the middle of the RFP, request for proposal process. What we have finished was the request for qualifications, or RFI, request of interest. And so the RFI generated 9 people who sent things in, 2 of which really weren't full proposals. So we were left with 7. And the Country Club Road subcommittee, made up of city councilors, is going to be reviewing those 7 to narrow it to 5, probably 5, to ask them to come in with full proposals. What would you do at this site? What are you building? Are you building lots of big apartment buildings? Are you building lots of single family homes? What's the mix? They won't be exactly where everything is going to be, but it's going to give enough of an idea, and looking at enough at the numbers to be able to start to look to make sure that, are you going to generate enough tax increment to pay for the infrastructure? Are you meeting the goals? What do we desire? Do we desire more rental housing or more ownership? And what's the balance between those? So there's going to be a process. That'll be a public process. And we're in the middle of that process right now. So I'll keep you up to date as that process moves forward. I'm trying to think. There's so much stuff that's moving right now. Things are kind of busy and crazy. You folks are probably all aware that Kelly has put in her resignation. She's this acting city manager. So it's we're already trying to hire a city manager. We're in that process. And now the acting city manager is stepping down and the finance director is stepping down. So we're kind of a little bit of trying to juggle things and trying to prepare for what's going to be coming up over the next couple of weeks. So that's the other part of our kind of our workload of what's going on. It's not only what's going on in the planning department, but what's kind of going around us. So, and I think that's it for update on planning projects.
Great, thanks. Okay, so next agenda item is continue work on the zoning amendments. Tonight, we're going to go through parts of Part 3, chapter 300. So I think it's, yeah.
3001.
3001, 3012, and chapter 310. Jeez. So what we've done, we'll do the same thing we did in the past. We'll have Meredith and or Mike just sort of give us an overview. And I think once one of the chapter or the part is done, we can have a discussion to just sort of talk about things if there's questions or whatever, and then we'll move on to the next one just to kind of keep it moving. So does that make sense, everybody? Great.
Okay.
So
And a little bit of catching up for Rowan's benefit. So we got done with the city plan, and as a part of the city plan, there was a discussion from the public that we needed to go back and review the zoning bylaws and look for changes. And when we started having that conversation, it was kind of realized amongst the planning commission that most of the commissioners now are new and weren't really here when we were going through a lot of this. And it would be worthwhile to just go through the zoning from front to back, kind of explain what all the pieces are. So that way, when we have a conversation, we can understand how the pieces fit together a little bit better. Because sometimes when we talk about things, something in like part 2, which is our zoning districts, is affected by what's going on in part 3, maybe site plan rules or something like that. And so we really have to figure out how to accomplish our goals. And so we've already gone through part 1, which really talks about what needs a permit. We've talked about part 2, which is what are the zoning districts? What do they talk about? And that includes the design review overlay district. So it's all the zoning districts we talked about. And then part 3, we started talking about what are the development standards. And the first section, chapter 300, are the general standards, which are items that all projects have to meet. So it doesn't matter what the project is, it's going to have to go through the general standards and meet them. And one of them, as we work our way through, is the parking and loading areas, which is section 3011. And so, like all of these sections, these all kind of go through. There's a quick purpose statement. We're trying to avoid congestion on surrounding streets while also avoiding excessive parking that results in increase in flooding, decreased water quality, increasing land consumption and sprawl, and a less attractive pedestrian environment. So we're trying to balance making sure we have enough adequate off-street parking, and then making sure we can regulate those impacts. So we don't want giant parking lots, but we also want to make sure there's enough there. So applicability is a fancy term of basically who needs to meet this requirement. And in this case, except within, so there is an exception, Urban Center 1, Urban Center 2, Urban Center 3, that's your downtown core. Urban residential, that's out in Country Club Road. And residential 1500 districts. All development shall provide off-street parking in accordance with this section. And all non-residential or mixed-use development shall provide loading areas. So except within those districts. So those first districts are don't have any parking requirements. So if you're in the downtown, you can build whatever you want without any parking. Within urban 1, 2, 3, urban residential and residential 1500s, there are no minimum parking or loading, but any parking or loading areas that will be provided shall meet the requirements of section G5. So that's really just getting into some of the details of just because you're exempt from parking doesn't mean you can put parking in front of your building, that type of stuff. And then we have the classic minimum parking amounts. And so that is all set up in a table, which is at the end of the section. And if a proposed use is not listed, or if there's any uncertainty, the administrative officer shall set ratios based on the listed uses. DRB may waive. So a lot of what we try to do in general throughout the zoning is to have rules that's like, if you can meet the requirement, we can issue your permit administratively. If you want an exception, then you have to go to the DRB. And we can go through and certainly see if there are areas later on where we might be able to make more of these administrative decisions and less going to the DRB. But the way things are set up now, if you want an exception, if you've got a requirement that says you have to provide 4 parking spaces and you're like, well, I only want to provide 2, but I'm near the transit center, then you might be able to get an exception to that. But the zoning administrator can't issue that. That's for the DRB to make the decision. And then there's a maximum parking requirement that says you can't apply more than twice. So that's to try to go and keep someone from building really big parking lots, oversizing parking lots. And then really the rest of this section, shared parking, loading areas, locational standards, we're really talking about just into the details of what would be a shared parking plan? How would that work? How long does the agreement have to be? Those types of questions we need to have answers for if we're going to be able to administer these. How close does it have to be? Can I do a shared parking agreement with somebody across town? Well, it doesn't seem to like it would really work. So it has to be, in this case, within 1,000 feet of the associated uses. So they're just basic standards that help to go through the locational standards, dimensional standards under state law. We're talking about parking spaces not less than 8.5 feet wide by 18 feet deep. And then some other general design requirements that go along with how these get placed and laid out, and snow storage. And there was something else I was going to mention about parking. It'll probably come to me. Oh, the parking spaces, the allowance of stacking. So one of the things we have is we're really flexible about how we count a parking space. So in our previous zoning before 2018, when I got here, everybody had to have exclusive parking spaces, which meant you couldn't block anybody in. And we kind of went through and said, well, this isn't really what we want. We want to give people, property owners, the flexibility. I mean, it really, if you have a duplex or a triplex and you have a 60-foot long driveway, you could stack 3 cars legally and meet the requirement for a triplex. How that gets managed isn't our problem as a city government official. That's between you and your tenants to go through and say how you guys want to work together for parking. You're going to have to go and stack it so the first person that leaves in the morning is the person who's parked on the outside, and they may park on the street during the day until everybody's in, and you'll figure it out. And when I lived in Burlington, that was what we had. We figured out we had a really small driveway, and we would pile everybody into that little driveway, and we would work together to make that work. Because when winter came, you couldn't park on the street. So that, as we said, there's a lot of things they could certainly go through and make them exclusive if they want to, but they also don't have to. So we're really flexible when we say we've got parking requirements. We also have a lot of rules that really make it easy to meet. And hopefully this helps people come up with creative ways of meeting these requirements. So big picture, we require, if you're talking residential, 1 parking space per dwelling unit. Across the country, you might have 1 parking space per bedroom. You might have much higher standards, 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit, 2 parking spaces per dwelling unit. We really have gone down to a very low number. People are always welcome to have more if they want, but you have to provide the minimum amount. And then we've got requirements that also reflect a not too aggressive requirement for parking. I don't think we've had a lot of complaints on the commercial side for the number of required parking spaces.
Not really. No, not for the commercial side. No.
So, questions?
What's some of the feedback that you've received on the residential side?
So I think in the last year, the biggest things that have come up there really are locational, right? Because the one thing to remember is that the impervious surface maximum totals are gonna interact with this for how much parking you can have, because you also can't, in a lot of districts, you can't cover your whole parcel.
Yeah.
So they all work together and overlay. But there is a requirement in here in many zoning districts that if there's parking that isn't part of a residential driveway, then it can't be in front of the house. So it can't be between the front line of the house and the road. So not just directly in front, but anywhere along in that section. You have to get to the side of the house if it's not part of the driveway. So that one has been a little bit of a question mark when it comes to some of the larger potential residential developments that I've had discussions with people about, but I haven't seen applications for.
Yeah.
Where, maybe it's because a lot of Montpelier is hilly, and so they don't want to get into the slopes that are back behind where they want to put the house. But maybe, how do you create parking for 6 or more vehicles and have it be sort of branched off to the side of the driveway and have me still be able to look at it and say, yes, that's still the driveway, right? We don't have something that says, when does it become a parking area, not driveway?
Mhm.
And the 1 sec, because right now the stacking for residential within a driveway is only allowed for not more than 4 dwelling units. So when we're talking about these bigger projects that the zoning has been tweaked to allow, where it's, up to 6 dwelling units is allowed as long as you've got water and sewer, we have people trying to play around with those and trying to figure out how to then do the parking.
Yeah.
So that one has come up. And also, I think that's been the biggest one. The shared parking thing sometimes is a little funky in here, but that's not necessarily a residential thing so much. It may come up and looking forward if we have some bigger
Mhm.
residential. Gabe, was that you?
Yeah, so what's the policy reason for is this just an aesthetic thing that people decided on at one point? I've been to plenty of town.
It's been there since before I got hired. I had no idea.
Can you imagine?
You can't have parking in the front of a building, right? I've been to plenty of residential neighborhoods where there's parking right in front of the building, and you walk in and you see your friends and they're awesome, and you walk out and you get in your car and you leave. It's cool. It's not a big
Yeah.
problem as far as I can tell.
Yeah, it's in aesthetics, and that's why it's in. Now, what we've been talking about trying to do is to potentially allow, if you had the house and the garage, that you might be able to do some parking off to the side, but we need and are trying to encourage having that green space in that green area in front of the building and not have people turn
But it's
the
aesthetic.
front. It's
is the bottom
aesthetic.
line. It's not some kind of like stormwater thing.
No.
But that is another thing, right? If you have half of your house and your roof is all going towards the front and it's hitting pavement and going straight to the road, you're not slowing down that stormwater at all. So that is a potential factor, right? You don't have that green space to create some degree of, or at least you have less of it, to create some degree of infiltration.
Right. So
Um,
that has to get factored into hydrology, whatever.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and but if you have, we don't necessarily hit a stormwater evaluation until we get to a larger project, like we discussed at I think it was this most recent meeting. So trying to encourage as much of a green buffer in front, depending on how the elevation is of the parcel, right? 'Cause sometimes the drainage is towards the back. You're gonna run into, there's a couple of different reasons to have that more green space in front if you can. But I mean, it could be just a tweak to say you can't, you don't want it right in front of the house. Can be in that front line, but off to the side, right? Which gives you green space for water coming off the roof. That would be one possible tweak. It's also putting in, like right now, there isn't specifically a waiver or an exemption option for somebody to go to the DRB for this particular item.
So can I just ask,
That's
so
an option.
let's say, for example, we change that. We said, we don't care if you park in the front or the back. We don't care. if there's a water issue, that's still gonna get triggered someplace else in the process, right?
Not necessarily,
Why not?
unless you change this, because you may not hit the trigger point for the either 5,000 or 10,000 square feet of impervious surface. That right
Which-
now is the trigger for stormwater management plan.
Which that, in my opinion, that would be fine. I mean,
I'm just saying that
yeah, yeah.
it might not get, those are amounts that were just picked, right? We don't,
Right. So let's say you don't hit that threshold in the front of the house or the side of the house. I personally don't really see a difference in the placement besides the aesthetics of a driveway and parking.
Right, it's the same impervious surface, right?
Exactly. Actually, I'd see it as maybe potentially less impervious surface if it's in front of the house. You have less driveway going around to the side.
Probably.
yeah, I was just thinking of the unslowed down water hitting I mean, you're driving along in some places here in Montpelier and it rains and water is just pouring down people's driveways and hitting the road. That's all I'm thinking,
Oh, from
right?
the
And then
driveway
well, then gets into the
dripping
city
to the road.
stormwater system faster than if there's, I'm
Yeah.
just
Yeah, yeah.
not,
No, I hear you.
I don't have a preference here. I'm just
No,
pointing
I think
to the
it's.
considerations.
I think all these considerations are great, and
That's
this is a helpful conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's,
Mer-
I'm
Meredith,
happy to make
Yeah,
it
yeah.
work however you guys decide to make it work.
Yeah.
Meredith, during our hearings for the city plan, we had two they weren't applicants, two individuals that came in and talked about problems they had with trying to get waivers. One of them was Peter Kellman. He was interested in buying a state property that just is outside of the residential 1500, and he wouldn't have enough parking to do a residential conversion. I feel like the other one was Nathan Suter, but I might be misremembering, but it was another property operator in town that just said, this process of getting a waiver, it's in the books, but it's harder than you think. And so can you address that? Is it hard? I mean, what's hard about it and why did those things not work out?
So off the top of my head, and I think Mike and I discussed this a while back, maybe during this, I don't know when. I can't think right now of anyone who has come specifically for a parking waiver and not gotten it from the DRB. You have to do the process, right? And you have to provide me with sufficient information for me to say, yes, this is a complete application, so I can put it to the board so that I think they can make a decision. But where's the waiver language? Hold on. So the waiver, right? These are ors, right? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different options. You can do a parking study, but you don't have to. You can provide a shared parking plan, which means that you have made arrangements for parking off of your site that comply with the requirements of that shared parking plan. You can prove that there's adequate on-street or public parking available within those 1,000 feet. Show that there's an existing or proposed public transit stop within a 1/4 mile of the proposed development, or that the proposed development provides secure, unenclosed bicycle storage and shower facilities for employees or residents as applicable. So it's all of those things with an or. Usually so far, people can come up with at least 2 of those and present it to the board. For Peter's specific proposal, I laid all this out for him. He never came back to me with an actual application and something to show these things.
His major complaint was that he felt this should be an administrative decision and should be able to be issued, and not go to the DRB.
Oh, so maybe that it could be waived, but it could be administrative.
He wanted it to be administratively
Which it can't
waived.
be, right?
Yeah, waivers. Yeah, I
You don't
I
waive.
would not do exemptions, waivers, or
That needs a policy, that you need
Y-
appointed person to do.
Yeah, and the reason for that is each part of the city is different. And in Peter's case, we said we felt he would get it, and the city staff would support his application, and we very much felt like he would get it. All he had to do is ask,
Mhm.
but he didn't ask.
Because I mean, that particular location was within
Within a quarter
Range-
mile of a bus stop.
quarter mile of bus stop. There's public parking on the street, even if it's used various times of year. And if he could provide bicycle, I mean, he would have 3 checks there. I would have recommended that the board.
But he didn't want to go through the
approve it.
process. And so that was the major hang up with that one, was really more a matter of him wanting the process to not have that hearing. But big picture, different parts of town. And so, yes, we would be notifying neighbors if there's a hearing. And in some parts of town, this is an important, on-street parking is one of those things that, if you don't have on-street parking, a lot of times you don't even need parking requirements. What else are they going to do? They're either going to park on the lot or they're not. But usually by requiring on-street parking or off-street parking, it's to mitigate on-street parking, to make sure there's enough off-street that we're not having everybody parking on the street. And in some parts of town, East State Street, Berry Street, you've got areas that have that section of Elm Street. You've got areas where there's a lot of congestion on street. And if somebody were to come in and say, I'm going to build another 8 units, but I'm not going to provide any parking, I'm just going to dump them on the street, the neighbors are going to want to go, hey, wait, we don't have any more space for any more parking, especially when it snows and we've got to start alternating during the summer when we can park on both sides. It's not too bad. In the winter, we're crushed over parking on one side and there's not enough space. And they should be required to have a certain number. In other parts of the downtown, there's plenty of on-street parking, and it's not an issue like this one was over in Baldwin. There's room to have off-street parking. And that's why we have the hearings. That's why we have the requirements. And again, that's a policy decision. We could just go through and say, whatever, doesn't matter. Let everybody fight out the parking, but it is something that when you get to city council and start saying we're going to remove the parking requirements, the folks in these areas that have congestion are going to say, we really want to have an opportunity to comment on a project that's going to put a lot of additional parking on street. But it is a policy decision. We don't have to have these types of requirements.
Have you done a lot of waivers, Meredith? Has there been a lot of applications?
No.
No. Do you
No,
have
I
any
mean-
sense of because a lot of the DRB fears, right? You go and you got people that come and say all kinds of things, right? And people don't want to go, even if they met all of these criteria, and you know that it's a slam dunk that the DRB is going to approve it. It's still a public process, and so they're still going to get out, and people don't want to deal with that. When you've had them, are people coming out and arguing about the parking? Is that something people are taking issue with?
Not typically. I think I've had more contentious hearings about somebody trying to put in a second driveway so that they'd have room for their teenagers' cars and places for their friends to park on a dead end road that wasn't in the street.
Yeah.
Yeah, the parking waiver ones have not been difficult so far. I
Yeah,
mean,
like
we haven't had lots of projects.
And
but-
stuff's pretty, the minimums are pretty small. So,
Yeah, I was just curious, where did we come up with all these minimums? Is it, do we use was there like a planning association model that we adopted, or are we just?
yeah, there are standards.
This is ours.
Yeah, there are
We-
standards that are very famously bad standards. There's an entire book called the High Cost of Free Parking, and it goes through, and one of the things they joke about are these transportation studies that tell you how many parking spaces you need for this use, and it's a line graph based on one data point. And they draw a line through it, and you're like, well, you actually can't draw a line with one data point, but they do. So yeah, a lot of these, that was what was in that book, was to kind of go through and say a lot of the rules are bad. So we've gone through, and ours are, as we said, much lower. So the requirements, and they seem to work. There's some new new standards. These were recommended by our consultant, so I don't know specifically where she pulled them from, but they seem to, in our view, seem to have been working pretty well. But if something comes up where we find they don't, we can always go through and tweak this. But so far, they really seem to have kind of worked. I don't know where they got them from, but
Yeah.
in the past,
Yeah, no,
yes. If people comment in the past, it's like yes, absolutely. The Daniel Shoup people who've read that book will go through and tell you yes, they're terrible.
Yeah, no, I mean, just some of the ratios are just unique. I mean,
Yeah.
I would never think of these numbers, and so if it works, that's great. But
Well, so far, especially for the non-residential ones, I have not had somebody come and need like these work out for them in most cases. I haven't, Tractor Supply got put in before I was here.
I think Bar Hill would have been the most recent.
Again, they got their approval before I was here. But I've had people come and do renovations, change uses, and most of the time, if it's where there was already a parking lot, the parking lot that is there existing is way more than what we require now as a minimum. Residential is a different story, but a lot of the good residential properties are already built. And so they're dealing with some of the, smaller parcels that have been subdivided, parcels that are, hilly. And so that's where some of the tweaky things are coming into play, where they're like, we don't want to try and try and get the parking behind because then we have to push the house closer to the road, things like that. Those are the ones that are coming up as flags right now, in general.
yeah, I mean, I guess that's really my question is with kind of our focus on promoting infill development.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like we're starting to get some friction with that already.
Yeah, I mean, so far it's really the locational. It's definitely not the minimums that we require. People want to do more parking than that for the residential. A lot of times people come in with residential and definitely want to do, if it's not really small units and it's not right in downtown, they'd prefer to have 2 parking spaces per unit. And that's why when we're looking at the 6, it starts getting harder to fit it in. When I look at these, if you're putting a space, in a garage, something like that, or underneath the building, those get counted to meet, and that's where it's good to have the max so they can start creating more space and, fit just as long as it fits in the driveway. I don't count those necessarily as spaces. It's your room to fit vehicles within those measurements that we have for minimum spaces within the driveway outside of the public right of way. So, a driveway that has a curve to it, we count the whole thing. And as long as you've got enough room to meet that minimum, then we're good. But yeah, there are some where it's getting tough for the not having it in front.
Yeah.
Sorry, Maria.
So, I feel like I see all of these zoning regulations as just restrictions on building. Because they're like, well, you can't build like this because we want you to build like this instead.
Mhm.
And so the parking to me is like, well, where people really want parking, we don't require off-street parking, right? Like downtown, like the really congested parts of the city, we don't require on-street parking, which I agree with because that's a really walkable part of town.
Mhm.
The city, I feel like Montpelier is just like a difficult place to plan because it can be so dense and then it can be so vast, and it's all within like, is it 8 square miles or even less? And so I think what this is really targeted at is these areas like East State Street, like the kind of like the mid-range between downtown and like the Res 9000 and above.
Mhm.
I don't see at all why parking would be regulated for Res 9000. I mean, I think in most cases, developers will want to include parking because it's an amenity that people want out there. But it's not like parking is hard to find. On-street parking is not hard to find once you get up to Town Hall Road.
I'm sorry, you mean off-street parking?
on-street parking.
But up on Town Hill Road, you
Town-
can't.
Not on
park-
Town Hill Road itself, but like
Oh.
all of those
Side
offshoots, like the,
Oh, yeah, I mean, a lot of those also you can't necessarily park on the street. It depends on how they've set it up with the different subdivisions. I'm not
Office
necessarily
time?
picking.
or like your neighborhood, are you allowed to park on street?
Yep.
And that's not, I mean, we have these frontage rules too. So there has to be like 30 feet between how, a frontage, which is more than enough space usually to handle the car load of that house.
Yeah, so I mean, so I think the point is, these don't come up there. They're fine. Their driveway is gonna be more than sufficient. So the minimum parking doesn't come into play. I'm trying to figure out.
Well, I'm trying to figure out
You're
when
wanting
is
to-
this justified? When is this restriction on construction justified? It is definitely not justified, I think, on res 9,000 and above, because as you said, it's not really an issue up there. I think the argument is that it's justified in these, like the mixed use residential, right? Of East State Street. There's a lot of different districts, but these kind of like close in neighborhoods where there are apartments, there are buildings that have been cut up into apartments, where people might be jostling for on-street parking, which is also not really the case on East State Street because I live there. And I prefer to park on street versus in my driveway because actually it's closer to my front door. And now there's also a discussion of getting rid of on-street parking on East State Street. And the neighbors are also up in arms about that. So they want both their off-street parking and their on-street parking.
I think we lost audio online. I
Yeah,
don't know. Somebody's computer. No, can they hear?
I was trying to figure out if it was me or not.
No, it's online. I think they realize what's happening.
Sorry, I guess we got disconnected for a bit.
Yeah, you're back.
Okay. So I would love to see more construction in these closer in neighborhoods. And I don't see it happening if we're going to require parking for each unit built. Like, I don't think the infill will happen because the infill currently satisfies this one parking space per dwelling unit. And how are we going to increase that if we still require every unit to have its own parking space off street? But like, will we actually see the infill happen?
Yeah, a lot of them already meet it because for the most part, we have very liberal ways that we count parking spaces. So a lot of it gets met, but it is certainly something else we can bring back up. So we, as we said, we are 1.0 required per dwelling unit. We can go to 0.5. The only catch to that would be, or 0.75 or something less than that as a requirement. We would just have to go through and have a discussion about the maximum parking because you can't have more than double. So we might, if we cut that one in half, we might have to go through and you can't have more than 4 times because um, certain uses want to have a little bit more parking. And if they want to have more parking, as long as they can meet the stormwater requirements and all the other requirements,
Yeah, I mean, the other option is to expand the number of zoning districts that don't have to meet that minimum parking standard, right? If they build the parking, they still have to meet the design standards. So that's, do you suddenly bring in, I mean, there's going to be a whole discussion, right, about
Yeah.
where
zoning districts and how many of those there are and and that's the other option is to look at some of these places and when talking about if you're changing zoning districts or combining zoning districts, do you then include some of those in those groups that don't require minimum parking?
Right.
Right.
But then it's like, then we're only applying the parking rules to these like kind of like farther out neighborhoods. And do they really need the city requiring off-street parking?
Yeah, certainly that's an option
You
too.
know.
We could go through and add additional districts. We can say in the rural district, we don't regulate parking. For the most part, the rural districts are Route 12,
Right.
these outer areas where you already can't park on Route 12 anyways. So why regulate? That's why I said you really don't need to regulate off-street parking in areas where you can't park on street because you're just where else are you going to park?
Yeah, I mean,
It's self-regulating.
Yeah.
So in a number of places, that's where we've had some unique things because the parcels are bigger. So somebody might have a house 100 feet off the road, and then we have a requirement that you can't put your parking lot in front of the house. It's 100 feet off the road.
Right.
I mean,
It's true.
how much of this really matters at that scale and at that time? But yes, certainly these are good ones when we get to bringing up recommendations. As Meredith says, if we're combining districts and we combine 1500 and Res 3, which we've talked about, why wouldn't we just combine those two zoning districts together? Then we'll have a question. Okay, well, 1500 is exempt from parking. Res 3000 is not. We might combine them and then say, all right, well, now Res 3000 doesn't have parking requirements. And then we're really just starting to limit down to a smaller number. I think we would have to do some homework if we were going to try to completely eliminate parking standards throughout the town. Or at least minimum parking requirements, just to see if there's another municipality that's tried to take in such an approach and what was the impact.
Is the guy that you were talking about that wrote the book, is that Shoup?
Name is Donald Shoup.
Yeah. So apparently we want to look at this offline, a parking reform network. They're tracking, there's like 100 small cities that have already done this. And then there's some large cities as well. So if we want to just see, okay, who's out there that's doing it?
Yeah. Larger cities, it makes a lot more sense. There's basically a principle of you want to park once, shop many. So what you want to do is to have parking lots that are municipally owned or privately owned and open to the public. Anybody can park in this. And so you can park and then you can shop everywhere and come back to your vehicle. And that's better because you can increase density. Suburban models automatically spread things out. So the example I like to use for Montpelier in a really small sense is you're going to pick up dog food at Guy's, you're going to grab some fries and burger at Buddy's, you're going to pick up your dry cleaner, and then you're going to go to Shaw's and pick up some stuff that you need. Technically, you need to get in your car, go to Guy's, get back in your car, pull out, drive 100 feet down the road, pull in, get your Buddy's order, get back in your car, go out, go down, pull into the dry cleaner, pick up your dry cleaner, drive across the street, go to Shaw's. because each one of those are privately owned lots. And when everybody owns their own parking, so I have my parking as the developer, as the business owner, I have my parking, nobody else can park here. That's why suburbia, boom, just goes in every direction. It just sprawls out because you can't park once and shop many. And because each parking lot is there, it automatically forces everybody farther and farther away to a point that you have to have a car because it's too far to walk to do all of your errands. So if you want to pull things together, and that's what Donald Shoup is looking at, if we want to pull everyone together, what we need to do is have opportunities where we park once. That's why we try to have public parking. And in some places, I think in Burlington, you actually aren't allowed to have private parking. There are some lots that exist grandfathered in, but for the most part, they won't let you build a new parking lot. It has to be public parking or available to the public, so that way you've got that ability to park once, shop many, and not have people causing congestion by going back in and going back out, going back in, going back out. And so that works. But we also need to make sure we've got the other balance of how do we make sure that we don't have too much private parking that goes in. Now that we're not regulating parking, private people might go in and put in a lot of parking lots and not necessarily make it effective. But yes, there are a lot of people who have been looking at it since Donald Shoup put out his book. I don't know how many years ago now. It's a giant book. I don't recommend reading it. I just recommend read this, just read the introduction and you'll understand the whole book. Because the rest of it is just facts of why it all works. But I've read it all and he's actually right. It does all work. So yeah, there are ones who are doing it at different scales. I think we'll just have to see if we can find a community of our scale and see what were the pitfalls and things to be concerned about. But it'll be an idea for, when we get there. It's an idea we've been at the cutting edge of doing a bunch of interesting things in Montpelier with our zoning. Maybe this will be another one that we'll look at.
I was going to say, in city planning, there's also this idea that on-street parking slows cars down. So if you want to make an area safer to walk in, allow on-street parking. And it was noticeable to me over the summer that a lot of streets, like Hubbard, Liberty, and then parts of Town Hill were repaved. And so now, like, the bumps in the road were no longer slowing cars down. And so cars started like shooting through these neighborhoods. And you saw like the Front Porch Forum posting about people like begging cars to slow down on these like, what used to be kind of quaint streets. But another solution to that is to fill streets up with on-street parking. If Hubbard Street is filled with on-street parking, cars will slow down. If Elm Street, the part that, well, currently we get like a 25-mile-per-hour blinky at us. If that part had on-street parking on both sides, cars would slow down because it's congested. If Main Street, again, where that you hit that 25-mile-per-hour blinky sign, if we had on-street parking, cars would slow down. It's like a truism throughout the city that if we had more on-street parking, people wanting to park on street or being forced to park on street, then cars would also drive slower. It would actually be safer for pedestrians, bicyclists. Removing parking from the street encourages cars to drive faster. These are the trade-offs. And so I don't see on-street parking as being a bad thing or something that to be avoided, which I feel like this section kind of like points at, that we're trying to avoid on-street parking. There's pros and cons to all of this, but to me, on-street parking is a sign of safety.
I have a question. Where might like zone permit parking fall into this discussion? That it seems like part of the issue here is we're worried. We want everybody to have a place to park, and there's some concern that in your neighborhood you might not have enough space to park in your neighborhood for whatever reason, but that maybe you could have a zone permit, right? That the city provides. I don't know if that's a can of worms we want to open tonight.
So everything, and it's helpful for everyone to remember as a reminder, as we talk about zoning, our jurisdiction ends at the road right away. So whatever happens on the street is actually under Kurt's as DPW director, his authority. So when it comes to like zone parking and can we use different tools for managing on-street parking, that will not be a part of our zoning because it can't be. It would be adopted into a parking ordinance or some other tool that would let us be able to manage on-street parking and decide how we would issue parking passes. Would there be a certain number of them?
How PD issues parking
Yeah,
passes,
how-
because we are not going to touch those.
Yes, we
Right.
do not. We do not issue parking passes. That would be
Right.
a parking division, a parking department, somebody with the affiliated probably with the police department that would handle those.
Yeah, and that also goes to the road standards, right? As to what streets meet the requirements to have on-street parking, which have to have bike lanes, which should have bike lanes, how you put those in, how wide it needs to be able to have the sidewalks and a bike lane and on-street parking, like all those things. There's a whole another document that we'd like to try and have some of this mesh with better than it does, like for the curb cut spacing and all those things. But the zoning doesn't go into where bike lanes are. And it does have notes about adding sidewalks. Later we'll get into that in certain cases, but how those sidewalks are designed, things like that, it all has to do with V-Trans or DPW standards.
Right.
So-
But certainly something that, if we are talking about parking, it's adjacent.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And there are places in the city where there's on-street parking, but they're by permit only. But that's a pretty limited thing. We definitely have to bring in other departments into that discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to add one thing to your point, Maria, and I'm not playing devil's advocate or anything, but I just thought we've had this discussion for years, and I'm always drawn to, there's a former planning commissioner, Marcella Dent, who I was always thought this was a pretty good lens to view this issue, which is, Montpelier in a lot of ways is a tale of two cities. In the summer, it's the best of times. In the winter, it's the worst of times. And, she advocated heavily for minimum parking, for adequate off-street parking, because in her experience here in the city is, when the winter parking ban went into effect, it was highly disruptive to her and a lot of people that she lived with in her building, because the building that she lived in didn't have adequate off-street parking. To me, that's always been a compelling issue to me. Just, it's not one that affects me personally, but I think it's something we do need to keep in mind, which is, and I think these minimum parking ratios have a lot of value in terms of like reducing that sort of stress that some residents have in the wintertime, because if you are completely dependent on-street parking during the winter, things can get very disruptive in a very short amount of time. If there's suddenly a parking ban goes into effect, as more and more streets, in the last few years have gone to the alternate side parking, it's just a very different landscape. I mean, in the summertime, I think you're right. There's a lot of good reasons for, sort of encouraging on-street parking. It just becomes a very different animal once the temperatures plummet and the snow starts flying. So I'm not saying you're wrong by any means, but it's always something that's always stuck with me with Marcella.
But is it better to have a parking spot than it is to have an apartment?
What are you trying to trap here?
I have been, I have had to rent places without adequate parking, but I was still happy to be able to rent something.
Yeah, I mean,
Like it's like these trade-offs.
yeah, and I'm just saying that we should be cognizant of the sort of full spectrum of concerns, and as we grapple with this, and I have a feeling this is because this has been such a perennial issue for the commission. I'm sure we're going to do a deeper dive when we start really tinkering with this. And I'm just saying, I take your point quite well, and I think it's all very valid.
John Adams is smiling somewhere right now, Maria, for you. So because John was here for 8 years arguing the same thing. And we had folks on the other side who were like, we just have a lot of folks that are in these apartments, and that's been an issue for them. And so parking is just one of those things. I mean, parking, traffic, those are the things that you want to have a public meeting on and bring everybody out. Those are the ones to talk about planning. Both sides, passionate.
Yeah, I'll just add anecdotally, I'm someone that has rented on Berry Street and in a duplex with 6 adults in a building and 4 cars, 6 adults. It's hard on Berry Street. It's hard being a renter no matter what. So definitely lived this life of on-street parking on Berry Street, and it is not fun.
The example that we had from Berry Street was not necessarily what's there now, but if we didn't have parking requirements and somebody then came in and said, I've got this big house and I got this parking lot, not very big, but I could, if I don't have a parking requirement, I could literally take my parking lot and put it in another building. Now, from a housing standpoint, wouldn't that be great? But for everybody on Berry Street, they're like, wait a second, we had a 6-unit building with 6 parking spaces. They were okay. Now you're going to build another 6-unit building and dump all 12 parking spaces onto an already crowded street. And there's no way of saying that's not okay. And that's a policy decision. That's a policy decision of the planning commission, and we'll enforce that rule, whatever it is. But those are the things that bring people out is, where can we say enough's enough and say that you have to provide something. But again, we can certainly go through and adjust these numbers. And as I said, I think Aaron's right. This is a perennial issue. We'll talk this out, and we'll probably come up to a vote. I think every time this has come up to a vote, it's been a split vote. What we do with parking.
As discouraging it is to say that we're not going to solve this problem tonight. We'll solve this issue tonight. Back to that.
Meredith, you have something to add?
I was just gonna say, I think, just as something that I know there's lots of different ideals and thoughts and hopes and dreams. I think trying to find a middle adjustment, a compromise, is a really good idea, because, I mean, I hear what you're saying about East State Street. I grew up here. We've also got Cliff Street is in the residential 9,000. People living on Cliff Street are not going to want a whole bunch of people shoving their cars to park on the street, right? So yes, I think that there, especially in some of the downtown neighborhoods, it's going to be really easy to meet that parking waiver. Let's just merge 3,000 and 1,500 and say none of those require minimum parking, even if you're just saying for residential, right? Or something along those lines. Find that space to make it easier for some people. But you also need to think about meeting the needs of everybody, which also means people who, need ADA parking spaces, need to have their vehicle really close to the entrance and not be fighting with other people for those spaces in the right of way that they can't guarantee just them, so that they can get their things into their home. It's a balancing act. So I don't think, I think it's trying to basically make everybody a little annoyed and everybody a little happy all at the same time on this particular issue, and see where it goes. And see what happens, because we do have DPW coming in and trying to figure out how to deal with plowing and in the winter time and all of those things, when we don't have any control over the actual streets themselves and how wide they are.
Only we had a municipally owned parking garage.
Oh,
Downtown.
I will say, just as we think about it, I know we're gonna move on to this last section, but there's also an argument to be made, like, well, it's actually a commercial thing. It's like the builder has to figure this out, right? Like, we're preventing people from doing things, but look at the downtown, the most optimal site for adaptive reuse is that federal building. We got a massive lot. I know there's all kinds of ideas about what might happen, but if you have residential housing, you could, I mean, I don't know how many units you could put in there. Meredith's already done the number, the hundreds, right? You could have a lot.
There's no residential limit.
There's no
That's,
residential limit.
yeah, so I don't do those numbers, that's building.
So you could do whatever you want. But the reality is, we all know in legislative session, there's no place to park. So if you built a structure that had no parking, like underground parking, I don't know who's gonna wanna live there, because they're gonna be like, this is a cool thing that I can walk everywhere, I can park, and I can go shop at all these places. But where am I gonna park? Like, so I just feel like, and there's no limit there currently, right? But the developer would have to figure this out. It's just not gonna, and you know, how do they do that in big cities? Like, I know you were in PC, like, okay, well, some of the units, maybe we're gonna sell parking spots or rent parking spots to the people that live in these buildings, right? Not everybody will have one, but somebody, for those people, it's really important too. There's a price tag associated with that. There's ways of solving it, but I'm just saying, like,
Yeah,
we don't
bigger
necessarily have to
municipalities will they'll have those private parking structures that you can purchase. And that usually is how those bigger cities handle it, is you got an 80 unit apartment building, and it's like, well, you're going to put 20 units of parking in the lower levels and in the basement. And then there's a parking garage that they'll just go through and say, yep, there's a parking garage. It's got this capacity. Whoever lives here can rent a parking space from there. And if you want to, and if you have a car, I mean, we know a lot of people who live in Boston. How many people live in Boston don't own cars just because it's too much of a pain to own a car?
It's also, I mean, the cost.
It's cost.
Like,
It's
parking and the
expensive.
cost.
And so that's where Donald Shoup comes in. Well, we separated the cost of the car from the residential unit. You no longer are paying for a parking space when you rent an apartment, because that has been decoupled. If you have a car or multiple cars, then you're paying for those separately to a parking organization or company that's over there. And I'm only paying for my apartment. And that's
In public transportation.
in public transportation. So yeah, those all work. Those, like, you're right. And those, the developer will work them out, because a lot of times their financing agents will say, I don't care that the city doesn't have a parking requirement. We didn't have a parking requirement for the hotel that was proposed with the parking garage. We had the parking garage because they weren't going to build a hotel and conference center without parking for their folks, and they couldn't get financing without being able to prove that economically this will work. And if you were going to build a hotel without any parking,
it kind of lends itself to
what bank is going to give you
deregulation,
money?
but,
Yeah.
you know, it's just
Yeah.
something.
So, but if we're ready for sign, I mean, who's going to get worked up at all about signs?
Tim is. This is your topic.
So the signs, again, these all kind of lay out the same way: purpose, applicability, prohibited signs, exempt signs. So again, it all kind of goes in with the same thing. Who needs to get a sign? And there's some design review requirements. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on these. And the reason for that is we had gone through and done a significant amendment since 2020. It's fairly recently, 2021, 2022, maybe,
You mean
to the sign regulations. All the sign, we changed a lot.
It's been working really, really well.
And so it's been really, we had a lot of issues with signs in the past. And so big picture, signs are really talking about commercial speech. So sometimes you'll hear people, well, you take away my freedom of speech. It's like, well, only if it's commercial speech. So we don't regulate people who are making political speech. Sometimes people don't always get that. They think we stop that. We just regulate commercial speech. So, for example, we had people who wanted to paint a mural on the side of their building. Great. That's not a sign. Unless you're deciding to put a giant pot leaf on the side of a cannabis store. Now that's a sign. But if you want to just put a mural on the side, that's fine. That's as long as it's not Coca-Cola and on the side of a grocery store, you know, the sign that's on the side of Shaw's,
Mural.
the mural,
that's not
the
a
mural
sign.
that is not a sign on the side of it. Again, it's a mural because there's no advertising of the products inside. So again, when we look at it, that's what we're looking at. A lot of the things, just so people know, internally illuminated signs are prohibited, but signs on the inside of glass, so inside the store, are not regulated. So the trick we always tell people is you want to have that open sign that's actually illuminated. Look at Aubuchon's. It's on the inside of the glass. It's on the inside of the glass. You can do it. So we try to work with people. We've got the rules that are available. We want, but at the same time, we're trying to set some standards. Probably the biggest one that keeps coming up that is gets a little whatever is some of those digital television signs. And you'll find like the school, we want to have a sign, we want a television screen so we can put, it's like, no, you can do a changeable letter sign. You can't do that other sign. And the reason for that is really it comes down to if we allow it for one group of people, then we have to allow it for everybody. And so if we allowed the school to have a big digital sign, then Dunkin' Donuts would be allowed to have, and so would all the other businesses. And as a policy, my recommendation was, I think we're better off not having those internally illuminated signs. We've got a lot of good sign makers. They make wonderful signs. They do a great job. Externally illuminated signs work just as well to communicate, and they don't look as gaudy and garish and everything else. And those television ones, I was involved in a case in Berry City when I was working there, which pretty much was the BOR. You drive by the BOR on Main Street, there's a sign there for the BOR, and it's a television marquee. And they said in their regulations, well, if you are a municipality or a church or a nonprofit, you can have these, but other people aren't. And the court said, no, if you're allowing it, everybody's allowed to have it. And so they did it, and now everybody is kind of allowed to have it, and it's kind of the cat's out of the bag. And it was a little disappointing, but hasn't gotten too bad. But it was, again, actually, I think they just said the municipality was allowed to do it and nobody else was, because the appeal was from across the street at the VFW. The VFW said, well, if the municipality, if it's that egregious that nobody should be allowed to do it, then why should the municipality be allowed to do it? And the judge said, I agree. So then the VFW was allowed to have a television screen as well. And then pretty soon down the road, Dunkin' Donuts had one. And so either everybody gets it or nobody gets it. And so my recommendation has been, we would be better off to keep ourselves where we are. The only exception we have in here, I think, is for the theaters, because the theaters within their things, they have they used to do them all with the paper for the upcoming events. So now they're digital television screens. So other than theaters, I think that's one of the only exceptions. And prices, little digital price signs for gas stations.
So that's the electronic message signs.
Electronic message
Internally
signs.
illuminated, just slightly different.
There we go. So there's a couple of very slight differences. That's the only thing, though, over the years that we've really kind of had come up a couple times with sign are the sign areas seem to work pretty well. We regulate projecting signs, directory signs. We've got a lot of exemptions that go in there and say these are things you can do, the sign lighting. But for the most part, I've heard very little complaints about how we've set up our rules.
Yeah, since we adjusted how we determine sizes and the maximum wall sign allowance, it's working really well.
Great.
Question.
Anybody have anything they want to say about the same signs?
So I don't know if we'll, I mean, 7:15, I don't know if we'll jump into
Yeah, no, I
chapter,
think-
perhaps chapter 310, just to tell you what it is. It's really about these special uses and structures. So we talk about these things, and then all of a sudden there's a certain thing that's like, okay, what about walls and fences? All right, we need to have a little bit of section just to talk about what's a wall, what's a fence, and how do we regulate them, or all these other things, temporary structures, community facilities, accessory dwelling units, child and daycare facilities. Now, we have these on the use table, but sometimes we need to have very specific uses of how would we handle telecommunication towers. Drive-throughs. Yes, our favorite drive-throughs and drive-in establishments, fueling stations. They all kind of have unique sets of rules that's like, there are rules for everybody else and there's rules for gas stations because gas stations are just funky because you can only have one driveway. Well, except if you're a gas station, because then you really need to have two, because how else are you going to get in and out without messing up the system? So they have a bunch of special rules, but that's all this list is a whole bunch. And some of these, I think personally, are unnecessarily really long. So if we're ever looking for places where we can shorten, I think we could shorten an awful lot out of our telecommunication towers ordinance personally.
I've never used.
We have never.
Because anything that's coming in so far is like, nope, we're exempt from you because we have a certificate of public good or whatever.
Yeah, the towers are just regulating the towers and not necessarily the antennas. The antennas are always exempt. And for the most part, 99.9%, in fact, I'll go and say 100% of our antennas are things that people just go out and put on another building.
Yeah.
It's on National Life.
City Center.
It's on City Center. It's in the tower of the church.
Yeah.
It's
It's way out. There are a couple of telecommunication towers. But they.
But I have to say, I think what if we got like 3 or 4 pages of stuff on requirements for it.
So let me ask this, we're not gonna do that tonight.
No.
Is there a want to go over that chapter at the next meeting, or is it so disparate that we don't need to?
That would be up to you.
I'm at all.
Camping that I want to talk about.
Okay,
Yeah,
then we'll.
emergency housing.
Sure.
A couple of tweaky things in there.
Sure, so-
that relate to resident.
Yeah, so let's do this. Let's be ready to talk about the chapter at the next meeting, but if anybody can take a look at the chapter prior to the meeting, and if there's some special issue that they want to talk about, I think that'll help guide that discussion, because yeah, I could see us getting bogged down unnecessarily in that chapter.
Yeah, camping is a little funky. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, we agree on the camping. Yeah. But again, if you're reading through it, you can skip the 7 pages apparently of telecommunication towers, locations and requirements.
I'm really curious.
And I mean, there is a whole section in here on residential uses where it's some specific ins and outs about residential. It's probably worth thinking through.
Okay.
And making sure. So if you don't, we should probably forward that.
That's good. Okay, so we'll table that discussion until next meeting, and it sounds like we will have enough people around to have a meeting in 2 weeks. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
So let's
Pretty
plan
good
on
for
having-
Christmas week.
Yep, it'll be the 22nd.
Yep.
The days will be getting longer.
Uh-oh.
So-
Second, hold on.
Yeah, I don't. That's Monday, the 22nd. Are you sure you can do that one, Mike? Or do you need, are you gonna?
I don't
need to
think-
staff it?
You might have to staff that one.
Yeah, and I may be pretty much taking the rest of the week off, but.
I don't have it in here, but it's my wife's birthday.
All right, you're done. You're done.
I am pretty sure I will be in deep
Okay.
trouble, so I won't.
Don't
be
even,
here.
don't say no more.
soon as you said
Thank you.
22nd, I was like, uh-oh.
That's. Yeah, okay.
I'm pretty sure I-
Fine
Hey,
about
maybe
that.
Given the light chapter, right, like you can see that, we can just limit it to that one thing. And I don't know if we wanna just do it.
I mean, the one after that is site plan. So, I think.
All right.
We
can
wanted
make
to
it-
work through just the specific use requirements. We could just work
Yeah,
through
maybe-
those and make a short meeting of it.
Yeah. It's the most wonderful time of the year, so. Keep it. Does that work for everybody? Just a shorter meeting to do that chapter? Yeah. Okay.
It would be helpful for me if people went through and just shot an email with specific subsections that they might want to go over, actually go through it as well, and know that, camping is gonna be a topic of discussion and things that I think of as residential, but let me know if there's something, funky that you wanna discuss, please.
Great. Looking for a motion for adjournment?
I would like to say one thing before we wrap up, if that's okay,
Please.
very briefly.
Nope.
And I didn't have a chance to say it earlier, but with the announcement of the assistant city manager and the acting city, sorry, and the finance director leaving, I did hear from a city councilor that both of them have cited toxicity of our public discourse as contributing to their decisions to move on. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you to Mike and Meredith for the work that you do. At times, very thankless, and I would say it goes even beyond that. But from me, thank you for the work that you do. It's really, I really appreciate it.
Yes, thanks.
Here.
And with that, I will motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right. Got a second from Gabe. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Nays. We are
All right,
adjourned.
thank you all.
Thanks.